There are moments when life feels scattered, confusing, and completely unpredictable, and those are usually the exact moments when God is shaping your trust. When everything makes sense, trust doesn't have room to grow. Trust grows when you're staring at circumstances you never asked for, dealing with pressure you weren't prepared for, and still choosing to lean on God even though nothing adds up around you. You don't learn trust on the mountaintop. You learn it in the valley where clarity is missing. When you can't figure out why things shifted, why certain people left, or why certain opportunities disappeared, that's when you're pushed into a space where you must choose between fear and faith. Confusion becomes the classroom, and that's where God starts teaching. Many times you're not confused because God is absent. You're confused because God is active in ways you can't perceive yet. What feels like chaos might be divine rearrangement. What feels like disorder might be preparation. Trust requires understanding that confusion can still be part of God's order. When life stops following your plan, trust begins to grow roots. You start to see that God isn't asking you to understand the whole journey. He's asking you to take the next step with the light He gave you. Trust isn't knowing where you're going. It's believing that God knows where He's taking you. Confusion forces you to shift your dependence. You stop relying on your own timing, your own logic, your own calculations, and you start leaning into God's ability to navigate what you never could. The less control you have, the more room God has to show you why control was never yours in the first place. And even when the situation feels frustrating and nothing is clear, something in your spirit starts to grow stronger because you learn how to stand on faith instead of understanding, and that strength becomes the foundation for everything God is preparing next. You only see the surface of your situation, but God sees the depths. You see what's happening now, but God sees what's ahead, what's behind, and what's waiting around the corner. When you trust God, you're trusting the one who has already navigated the road you haven't even walked yet. That's why you can move forward even when everything feels unpredictable. There are conversations being held about you that you will never hear. There are rooms where your name is mentioned that you will never step into. There are people being positioned to bless you who don't even know you yet. God works behind the scenes long before you see the results. Sometimes you think you're stuck simply because you can't see progress. But just because progress is invisible doesn't mean it isn't happening. Seeds grow underground before they break the surface, and breakthroughs often grow in silence before God reveals them. God is aligning things that must happen before your blessing can reach you. He's preparing the timing, the connections, the opportunities, and the resources. He's not ignoring you. He's building something customized for you, and building takes time. When you can't see anything moving, it becomes tempting to assume God is still. But God is never still. He's strategic. The silence isn't abandonment, it's calculation. The wait isn't punishment, it's precision. God is setting the stage so when your blessing arrives, everything is already in place. Trusting God means believing He's busy on your behalf, even when life looks quiet, and that trust becomes easier when you remember that God sees what you cannot and knows what you never will. A delay feels uncomfortable because it interrupts your expectations. You thought something would have happened by now. You thought the door would have opened already. You thought the opportunity was supposed to come last season. But when God delays something, it's never without purpose. Sometimes God delays because what you're praying for isn't ready. And sometimes He delays because you aren't ready. You might think you're prepared, but God sees the internal things that still need strengthening. He sees the habits that need adjusting and the character that needs development. Delay is often God's protection in disguise. If He gave you certain things too early, they would overwhelm you instead of bless you. If He let certain people enter your life too soon, they would distract you instead of support you. God knows the right time, even when you think He's late. Waiting seasons expose your patience, your discipline, and your faith. They reveal whether you trust God's timing or only trust God when His timing matches yours. It's in the delay that your faith gets tested and proven, showing you what you're truly anchored to. Every delay has a reason, and even though you may never understand it at the moment, God is positioning things so they align perfectly. What seems slow to you is strategic to Him. What seems stuck to you is structured to Him. He's not holding it back, He's setting it up. Trust grows stronger when you realize that delay is never the same as denial. And God's timing always carries more wisdom than your expectations. Before God shifts you, He disrupts you. Before He elevates you, He shakes your surroundings. Confusion isn't proof you're off track. It's often proof you're moving out of an old season and into a new one. Transition rarely comes wrapped in clarity. When life starts feeling unstable, you begin to understand that God is repositioning you. Comfort starts to fade, familiarity stops working, and what once felt normal starts to feel tight. That's usually the sign that God is moving you forward, even if it doesn't feel like it. Transitions are uncomfortable because they pull you from what you know into what you're meant to grow into. You can't stay where you were and become who you're supposed to be. Confusion becomes the hallway between your old season and your next season. During a transition, connections may shift, opportunities may close, and routines may fall apart. It can feel like you're losing everything, but sometimes God has to clear the room before He elevates you. Not every person or environment can walk with you into your next level. It's natural to question God in transitions, but that's when you must remind yourself that movement doesn't always feel smooth. Sometimes progress shows up looking like chaos. Sometimes elevation shows up disguised as uncertainty. That's why trust is essential. It keeps you grounded while everything around you shifts. And as the transition continues, you start recognizing that the confusion you felt was simply the sign that God was rearranging your life to make space for what He planned next. You can't ask God for miracles while still trying to control every detail of the outcome. Faith requires a release. It requires you to stop wrestling with what you can't fix and stop managing situations that belong in God's hands, not yours. Surrender isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's recognizing that your strength is limited, but God's strength is limitless. It's understanding that trying to handle everything on your own only drains you, exhausts you, and leaves you frustrated. Many times the breakthrough isn't held back by the situation. It's held back by your refusal to let go. You're clinging to old plans, old expectations, and old timelines. God can't pour new blessings into hands that are already full of things He asked you to release. Surrender teaches you trust in a deeper way. It forces you to admit that you don't have the answers, and that's okay. It pushes you to acknowledge that God's plan is stronger than your plan, and His methods are better than your strategies. When you finally surrender, peace begins to rise. You stop overthinking every possibility. You stop stressing over every outcome. You stop trying to predict every scenario. Surrender shifts the weight off your shoulders and places it back where it belongs. And once you release what you were never meant to carry, you begin to experience a different level of faith, a faith that moves freely, believes boldly, and trusts fully. You see through the lens of your experiences, your upbringing, your fears, and your expectations. Your understanding is shaped by limitations. But God's understanding is shaped by eternity. He sees things you don't, and He knows things you never will. Sometimes you question God not because the plan is wrong, but because your perspective is too small to comprehend it. You're judging the situation from ground level while God is viewing it from above. What looks confusing from your angle is perfectly clear from His. When you hit moments that don't make sense, remind yourself that God never asked you to understand everything. He asked you to trust Him. Your job is obedience, not explanation. God carries the blueprint for your life, not you. You may not realize how each moment connects, but nothing in your life is random. The setbacks, the delays, the unexpected turns, they all weave together in ways you can't see yet. God is constructing something far greater than your understanding could ever design. When you give up the need to understand every detail, anxiety loses power. You stop trying to predict outcomes. You stop trying to solve what isn't yours to solve. You stop letting confusion turn into panic. Trust becomes easier when you accept that understanding isn't required. And as you keep moving forward, you begin noticing that even without clarity, God's plan keeps unfolding in ways that reveal He always knew what He was doing. God doesn't always give you reasons before He gives you instructions. He may tell you to move, to let go, to change direction, or to step out without handing you a full explanation first. He wants your willingness before He gives you understanding. If God explained everything, you wouldn't need faith. You'd rely on logic instead of trust. That's why He guides step by step instead of revealing the whole journey. He leads you by faith because faith keeps you connected to Him. Sometimes you're waiting on God to explain, but He's waiting on you to follow. Movement often unlocks clarity. You don't get answers until you take steps. You don't get direction until you start walking. God reveals the path as you obey. Following God without explanations can feel uncomfortable, but that discomfort is part of your spiritual growth. It stretches you, it challenges you, it matures you. It forces you to depend on His voice more than your understanding. Even when God is silent, He's still guiding you. The lack of explanation doesn't mean lack of direction. You'll feel nudges, you'll sense shifts, you'll recognize moments where He's pulling you forward even without full clarity. And as you learn to follow without always knowing why, your relationship with God grows stronger because you realize He leads you even when He doesn't explain. Pain is uncomfortable, but it's purposeful. Some of the greatest lessons you'll ever learn come through struggle. Pain shapes you in ways comfort never will. It sharpens your character, strengthens your spirit, and prepares you for things you're not ready for yet. When God allows pain, it doesn't mean He's punishing you. It means He's preparing you. You're being developed, not destroyed. You're being refined, not rejected. You're being positioned for something greater than what you're currently holding. Pain pushes you out of complacency. It forces you to grow, adapt, rethink, and evolve. You start seeing life differently. You start valuing things more deeply. You start recognizing strength you didn't even know you had. Many times, the very experiences that hurt you become the experiences that elevate you. The pain that once made you cry becomes the wisdom that helps someone else. The struggle that once overwhelmed you becomes the strength that carries you forward. Pain introduces you to parts of yourself you would never meet in comfort. It shows you your resilience. It reveals your endurance. It exposes how much you can overcome with God beside you. Pain becomes the tool God uses to shape you into your purpose. And with each painful season you survive, you begin to understand how God uses struggle as preparation for the greater things He is building in you. It's easy to take a closed door personally. You might think you were rejected, overlooked, or denied. But sometimes the door didn't open because God saw something you couldn't. He saw danger on the other side. He saw something that would have delayed you or derailed you. Closed doors are not always punishment. Sometimes they're protection. God blocks certain opportunities because they would have taken you off course. He removes certain people because they would have harmed your focus. He shuts certain paths because they don't lead where He wants you to go. You have to trust that God knows more than you do about the doors He closes. You might have begged for the opportunity, but God knew it wasn't right. You might have prayed for the relationship, but God knew it wasn't healthy. He sees the long-term outcome while you only see the moment. Closed doors create room for better ones to open. When God shuts something down, He's making space for something aligned with your purpose. You may not understand it right away, but eventually you see why it had to happen the way it did. Sometimes you're trying to force open a door God already locked. You push, you struggle, you insist, and it still doesn't work because it's not meant for you. Trust means accepting that every closed door carries intention, and as you move forward, you start realizing that the doors God closed were just as important to your destiny as the ones He opened. There are seasons where you're walking through situations that feel completely unfair, unexpected, and unclear. You don't know why it happened. You don't know why it shifted. You don't know why it broke. But God sees the full picture long before you do. Understanding usually comes after the storm, not during it. While you're in the middle of it, everything feels overwhelming. But once you get on the other side, you start connecting the dots. You start seeing how certain things had to happen for other things to unfold. God reveals his reasoning in hindsight. He lets you live through the lesson before he shows you the meaning behind it. Clarity often comes after obedience. Wisdom comes after endurance. Revelation comes after resilience. Your confusion today might be the foundation of a testimony tomorrow. You'll be able to tell someone, I didn't understand it then, but I see it now. The very situation that confused you will become the story that guides and strengthens someone else. Confusion doesn't last forever. Eventually, God lets you look back and see how every piece came together. You begin to appreciate the journey even if it wasn't comfortable. You begin to respect the process even if it wasn't easy. And as time passes, you realize that what once confused you was actually part of a larger plan that has been unfolding all along. You may feel like God is taking too long, but his timing is always exact. He's not rushing because he's aligning things perfectly. He's orchestrating details you can't see, preparing people you don't know, and opening pathways that aren't visible yet. God doesn't operate on your schedule. He operates on purpose. If he moved too early, you wouldn't be prepared. If he moved too late, you'd miss the moment. His timing is the intersection of readiness, opportunity, and purpose. While you're waiting, God is working. He's aligning circumstances so when your blessing arrives, nothing can block it. What feels slow is actually strategic. What feels delayed is actually being designed with precision. Sometimes the timing feels frustrating because you're eager for change. But eagerness doesn't equal readiness. God makes sure everything is in place, not just for the moment you receive it, but for the life you'll build with it. When your timing and God's timing don't match, it's easy to get discouraged. But that's when trust must rise. You have to remind yourself that God sees beyond the moment. He sees the future impact. He sees the long-term blessing. And as his timing unfolds, you begin to see why certain things couldn't happen earlier, and why the moment it finally arrives feels undeniably right. When you choose to trust God without having all the answers, something shifts inside you. Your fear starts to lose its grip. Your doubt starts to weaken. Your confidence starts to rise. Trust awakens strength you never realized you possessed. Trust gives you the ability to face situations that once intimidated you. It pushes you through circumstances that should have broken you. It allows you to walk through uncertainty with a calmness that makes no sense to anyone else, but perfect sense to your spirit. When you trust God, you stop letting worry dictate your decisions. You stop letting fear control your movement. You stop letting anxiety shape your perspective. Trust becomes the force that carries you through storms with stability. Trust equips you with courage. Not loud courage, but silent courage, the kind that stands firm even when life shakes. The kind that says, I don't understand this, but I know God is with me. That kind of courage makes you unshakable. Trust doesn't eliminate challenges, but it changes how you handle them. You approach problems differently. You speak differently. You think differently. You endure differently because you know you're not fighting alone. And the more you trust God, the more you discover strength, resilience, and faith within yourself that you never knew existed